Thank you for staying with us on NTV at 1. As I mentioned before we took the break, I'm joined now by the CEO of the Kenya Climate Innovation Center, Edward Mungai. Karibu sana to the program. Government is considering reopening business in the country, of course, the closure occasioned, or rather impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. How has COVID-19 impacted your clients? Because you work with micro, small and medium enterprises, helping them innovate around issues to do with climate change. How have they been affected?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is that COVID obviously have presented kind of a very brutal situation for our clients, specifically because, well, first of all, they were not on e-commerce. Many of them were still doing business inter-county. And then when we closed down the borders of the counties, then definitely revenues shrinked. Now, in terms of revenue, that is one key perspective that we have really lost in terms of the enterprises. The second thing is in terms of productivity. The kind of the restrictions and the kind of protocols that the government is putting in place obviously is restricting the kind of productivity we used to have post-COVID-19. And I think also in terms of their wellness, that also is a little bit of a challenge. And more importantly, also the customers and the power for customers to pay for products, also that have been challenged. Well, the good news is that as an organization, we have come up with measures which then should try to help us to manage what have been happening to our clients. I must say that these are businesses which are very specific in terms of resolving another big pandemic which is coming, which is called climate change. And what we have seen is that we have worked with them for 7 years. We are going to lose these businesses because of the challenges that the COVID-19 is presenting. Definitely what that means is that we must come up with solutions. For instance, we have set up an emergency fund. I talked about cash flow shrinking. We have an emergency cash flow or fund which is helping these businesses so that then we can make them to be resilient and for them to be able to continue. Obviously giving coaching and kind of counseling services because of their wellness. And this is something that many people are not taking seriously. But we have taken it very seriously that we should be able to support them from that perspective. Of course, putting them on e-commerce and helping them to come up with ways they can be able to sell digitally. That's also a very important point. And more importantly, also giving them the skills and business continuity plans which can keep them going. So these are some of the challenges that we have seen as a result of COVID-19. But I think generally and obviously it's better to look at it from the perspective of the staff that we are dealing with, and we have, as KCIC, we have put in mechanism. But I think more importantly also, I talked about the clients, but also as Kenya, we have a duty and responsibility as an entity to help Kenyans. And that's why together with our development partners, DANIDA and European Union, we have called for 2 calls for young people to come forward, give us ideas on how we can be able to help them to cope with COVID-19 by setting up new businesses and innovative businesses. And those are some of the things that we've been trying to work on, also to be responsible citizens as an organization.
Okay. You mentioned another big issue, of course, is climate change. And Greta Thunberg is a major activist as far as climate change is concerned. And she said climate change is just as urgent as COVID-19. Why do you think people haven't quite taken it as seriously as they have the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, the biggest thing about climate change is, yes, it's urgent, but it takes very slow pace to take effect. Now, we are talking about in another 50 years is when probably, of course, we have started seeing the impact, but big impacts like what we are seeing with COVID will probably happen in 20, 30 years to come. And that is why we haven't taken it very seriously. But the good news is there's many elements that we can be able to borrow from COVID-19. One of the key one, and really I'm very happy about it, is that eventually policymakers, government can now listen to scientists. Politics and science is coming together to solve challenges. This is something that we haven't seen before. COVID have made it possible. And in terms of climate change, we need to see government, we need to see policymakers talking to scientists and trying to appreciate and to see how we can resolve it. Of course, the other big thing is that innovation. Well, now people are working 24 hours to come up with a vaccine for the virus. We also need to have the same initiatives in terms of helping innovations within issues of climate change. And of course, that's what we represent for as Kenya Climate Innovation Center, to try to steer innovative solutions that would be able to help us. And more practically, I think we have also seen that there's some benefits that climate change fight is getting from COVID. For instance, maybe we wouldn't be here, I would be probably in the US trying to again, spread the gospel and preach the gospel about climate change. But I didn't have to fly all the way. So that we have given our environment a breather, and which is something that is very important to know that in future, we can be able to do meetings without necessarily taking 8,000 miles to go to the US or to go to Asia to be able to present that. Of course, even as individuals, we've also seen that there is also a capability that as individuals, as countries, we have a role, a duty and responsibility as individuals to fight climate change. I mean, for COVID, we are all putting our arms together and trying to fight COVID. We need also to do exactly the same when it comes to climate change.
Correct. You know, listening to you, and you've talked about how your clients, you're attempting to help your clients innovate around the COVID-19 pandemic to remain robust and viable in this new normal. And you've talked about e-commerce. What I didn't expect you to talk about was counseling, providing counseling services. Why did you feel that there's a need to provide that?
Well, the key thing is that, and I give you an example, this is probably the first time since March 15th that I've come to CBD. Before that, I used to come of course, every day. Now, the distance between my office and my dining room is 30 seconds. Before, I would spend an hour or 45 minutes interacting with colleagues and people talking. This day, I don't have that opportunity. Of course, what that means is mentally, I need to be taken care of. Unfortunately, we are not taking it very seriously. We have started seeing kids banging doors. We have started seeing observable behaviors. And this is all about mental wellness. This is something also we have taken very seriously, where we have put services for our clients so that then they can be able to acquire these services. They can be counseled and they can be able to be told on the things to watch for. And hopefully then we can still keep them doing what they know best, which is innovating for climate change.
Okay, so you talked about, like, one of the good things that's come with the COVID-19 pandemic is now governments are listening to the scientists. Assuming President Uhuru Kenyatta is watching this broadcast, and why not? He should. What do you have to say to him as he prepares, perhaps on July the 7th, to talk about where we stand as far as COVID-19 is concerned?
Well, I think the president have done extremely well, or the government have done extremely well in terms of listening to the scientists, as far as the health concern is, COVID-19 is concerned. Now, when it comes, and they have done a good job, where we need to do a good job. 3 weeks ago, EPI, which is Environmental Performance Index, rated Kenya as number 132. 2 years before we were number 130. We are kind of slowing down. What I urge the president is to also listen to the scientists in terms of climate change, listen to people who are trying to build the private sector to think about climate change, because we cannot win climate change by policymakers only. Private sector must be able to play a role, and we must be able not necessarily to give incentives, but we must have a support mechanism to businesses to take sustainability very seriously. The president is really keen with SMEs. I want to urge him to continue working with SMEs, but also to note that, of course, with COVID and with climate change, we see more challenges. So in terms of taxation, in terms of the incentives that are there, let's rethink them. Also availing funds to these businesses, because that's what we need to grow these businesses. And it will help him to solve the challenge of unemployment. It will help him to solve some of the social good that we need to be provided. It can be provided by private sector and SME for that matter. So my focus to him is really continue the journey with SMEs, but even think about it, how you can be able to move them even more faster than we have done before. All
right. Thank you so very much for spending some time with us this afternoon. Edward Mungai, who's the CEO of the Kenya Climate Innovation Center. He's talked about how they've been forced to adapt in this new normal and focus more on e-commerce. And he's also called on President Uhuru Kenyatta, thanked him, of course, for what the government has done so far to support the micro, small and medium enterprises. But his focus has to do with innovation around climate change. And he says that is as urgent, echoing Greta Thunberg, that is as urgent as COVID-19. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so we move over to Tana River County, and the government